Can you see it? Yeah. That's the one. And am I presented the right one? Yeah, I think so. This one. Okay. Okay, so actually I actually saw Patrick's presentation. It was a couple of months ago in Amsterdam. And I decided to draw from my presentation the stuff that Patrick said as well. And I want to answer basically your question, Martin, about what happens, let's say, on JGit and what happened on the server side. Because the use case that Patrick was mentioning, they were basically use case client side. And Patrick, you mentioned it, you guys are planning to roll it out on GitLab anyway. You've done it already or not yet?
It hasn't happened yet.
Okay, not yet. And on JGit, we started already deploying on the server side, and we saw problems, right? And I'm talking about, let's say, what we did, and the problems we had, and the plans, and maybe we'll do a roundtable, because I need your help as well, of course. So, first, who is GerritForge? How many of you don't know who GerritForge is, what we do? Someone doesn't know, so let's say. So we are a company that are mainly focused on open source, on Git and Gerrit, so we are specialized with that. We started actually 17 years ago, and I realized that actually we are older than OpenStack. Wow, that's impressive. And you can see from my hair, right? So the headshot that was outside in the roll-up banner, I cheated a little bit. That was when I got married, right? And it's not me anymore. But from the point of view of the brain, it's still me. We are still running the company, and Gerrit is still alive. Also, Martin, you had different hair, I believe, 17 years ago. But we are still here. We are still innovative, which is good. And just one thing to say, compared to last year, we actually had also new stuff coming. So we are proud partner of Google Cloud. So you can now see and get Gerrit as a service on Google Cloud. You click one button, you got Gerrit, yours, multi-site, scalable, up and running, which is great because Martin knows the pain of managing Gerrit in a large-scale installation. And last but not least, we actually started working on Git only as well, not just Git with Gerrit. So we did a lot of innovation on the optimization of bitmaps. We are working a lot on the, reftable. We actually developed also a new system for improving everyone's Git performance. And we did some tests, and I'm going to show that one tomorrow, of GitLab with a tool that we developed, is GHS, and we're going to show some graphs on what we achieved. And we are doing the same with GitHub Enterprise as well. So about me, so that's the picture, right? That is cheating a little bit. But I was like that when actually I joined the Gerrit project, and I was telling Martin Fick that actually I didn't have the little Martin. So you should be proud that I gave the same name as you. But I was that younger, and I contributed quite a lot. And I like data, so that's the data of my contribution just to JGit and Gerrit. Actually, I'm a very skilled C developer, and I like C language so much. And I looked at the C code of Git, and it's great. And I'm really ashamed to say so, but from some pieces of code, they're much better than JGit, right? So, and I'm taking a lot of inspiration from CGit code when we need to do some fixes on JGit. So what I will talk about today, so I will cut a little bit the history of reftable because Patrick covered already, but I will talk about the work that we have done with JGit for reftable. And actually, we did just the last mile. That started long ago with Sean and then with Hanwen. But also, most importantly, let's say the benchmark that we did on the server side with some large-scale setups and the problems we saw. And I already talked about those problems 2 months ago to Patrick, and he said, can you please rerun the test with the latest fixes that I did to see if those problems are still there. Some are fixed, some of them, they're still there. So, but we can catch up over lunchtime, so I'll show you the test case that we ran. And then, what's next? And I need your help. So, Martin and everyone else, Scott, and feel free to help me in understanding what is the next step. So, when reftable actually started very long ago, 2017. See, this is when Sean Pierce, after the implementation of reftable in Google, they said, guys, maybe we should make reftable a part of Git, right? And he started posting on the mailing list exactly, let's say, how reftable should be organized, the data structure. He started writing the documentation. If you do a git blame of the reftable documentation in Git, it's actually from Sean. So reftable is coming from Sean. And I believe we all should be proud of the work that Sean has done, and this is his legacy. And we are so happy to make this happen in open source. Because actually, Sean did not implement the open source version, did the Google version that is not used in a file system. I remember that we asked Sean many times in the summits, at that time was called Git Together, why don't you open source the code? And he said, I could, but you guys are not gonna make anything out of it because it's using the Google thing that doesn't exist anywhere outside of Google. And then Hanwen did a very good thing that is taking basically all the specs of reftable, and all the implementation of reftable actually was almost there, because all the abstract classes, they were already in JGit, but there were no concrete implementation on top of the file system. So Han went there and say, let's do an open source implementation of the file system that everyone that is not Google can use. And we are so grateful for Han with that. And then I didn't mention Patrick here because I consider Patrick as part of Han because he worked in pairing with Han a lot, right? And Han did the beginning of the CGit implementation, and then basically Patrick did almost everything else. And as we can see, there is a lot more to do, and I believe there will be a lot more to do, right? Then there was a big gap from 2021 to 2025 where there was no development on JGit. The main reason is because also Han left Google and then didn't have so much time to dedicate on that one. So Matthias completed and made it, let's say, working. Basically, people started using what Han left on the code and say, that actually doesn't work for me, and started raising bugs, and Matthias fixed most of them. However, there was still one test that Matthias never did. There was, can we run it in production? He said, I talked with Matthias, it was a couple of years ago. He said, I'm not really sure I want to roll it out yet. I said, okay, we will do it, right? And we found problems, right? It wasn't working. So the first time that we rolled out JGit with reftable with Gerrit, we couldn't even create a change. I say, oh gosh, that must be something massively broken. And then what we realized that actually the caching mechanism that JGit has, so whenever you create a repository, actually, JGit creates a single instance of that object, and that is reused by all the other threads. And that was basically conflicted with the concept of reftable. Reftable is based on snapshots, and then all the threads are using the same snapshot, and all the threads couldn't see anything different from the snapshot. Because a snapshot, as the word says, is a snapshot. So you just take a picture, it doesn't move, and then they were not seeing what the other threads were doing, and it was a big mess. So Tony did a lot of work on making sure that everything was working end-to-end. So Tony at the moment is the booth, so he cannot, let's say, share his experience, but if you go to the booth number 5 of GerritForge, and Tony will explain to you exactly all the little things that he found and all the fixes that we implemented. So, and we then took Gerrit that now was fully working end-to-end, and we put to a stress. Because we are developing also GHS, and GHS is a system that basically replays years of traffic compressed in hours and fire against a Gerrit server, then it could find many more bugs on reftable. And he fixed them all. He wasn't happy until he got a system that was running for 12 hours, and 1 hour was 1 year of traffic compressed. So it means he has been running reftable in production for 12 years, simulated in 12 hours, of course. And he was able to say, that's working. And the result was then released at Gerrit 3.12.2. So write down, if you want to use reftable in production, 3.12.2, not 0.1, not 0.0, 0.2, okay? Write it down carefully. Okay, so let's go now to the good and bad, because I don't believe that ref directory is the old packet rest was all bad and reftable is all good. I believe there is trade-offs between the two, right? So what is bad about ref directory? I believe Patrick already touched the big points. And one thing that was really striking me, that there was basically no good way to delete a ref. So deletion of a ref was really ridiculously slow and was not even working. So we started a remote conversation with Martin Fick about some ideas of implementing tombstones on loose refs. And actually, I did a little bit of hacks. I did also a change on JGit that is sucking in and it's working with tombstone. It's private, but if you want to share your views, because It's not really nice. It's a hack, but it's working. So I've got also Tombstone working end-to-end with file directory and packet refs, and it's super fast. And it's not impacted by any concurrency, by other concurrent deletes. You remember the discussion over the issue? Yeah, that is working. So, but there was a lot of other things that are bad, for sure. Let's say the loose refs were exploding the file system and all the things you mentioned, absolutely. I was absolutely astonished on the CPU utilization of encoding, decoding of a SHA-1. That is binary. Why do you ever need to encode something that is binary? Just write it down, right? So that's so cool. And reftable, of course, and in JGit it's called file reftable database. Of course, has all the advantages that we know. And one thing that is really good in JGit reftable is actually the thing about compaction. So you don't have to delete the files immediately, right? You have time. At the moment, JGit does an immediate deletion, and that's a bug, right? I believe we should fix that, because we should not delete things immediately, because as Martin mentioned before, you could have many other nodes, they are accessing at the same time, and they may have problems with that. In the specs written by Sean, he was saying they should not be deleted immediately, and they should be eventually deleted. Something similar to also the preserves. It should be, I believe, preserved, and then you should have a job that you run whenever you want, and it's going to delete the stuff that has been there for long enough for any other nodes to not access it anymore. And again, to stress it, 3.12.2. I wrote it in the slides as well. One thing, if you wonder what is the QR code over there, is the people, they are remote, can use Slido. But if you're shy, or if you have a question, and then you will forget from now to the end of the talk, you want to write your question now, you can scan the QR code, and you can put the question even now on your mobile phone, and then at the end, we will answer them all, okay? Okay, so what is bad about reftable? Because actually we did also performance tests, and we saw things that are not so good with reftable, and actually they were better with packet refs and loose refs. So if you update a single ref, and as you know, Gerrit doesn't use a database, uses Git for reviews, and if you just do +1 on a change, that's updating only one ref, right? Or if you add a comment, a draft comment, that's updating only one ref. And that is going to be slower with reftable compared to packet refs. And we've got also data, right? I'm not saying how much, I don't know. I do know how much it's going to be slower, because we tested massively in production. Then other things is the auto reorg. So reftable, why packet refs does the repacking specific mechanism? Reftable can do packing and repacking of the refs whenever it thinks is appropriate, as Patrick was explaining before. And that is a problem, because that creates concurrency issues, right? Because it's not just Gerrit or JGit using that reftable. You could have some other admins that may are doing some operations, or the hooks. In Gerrit, lots of people that use hooks, server-side hooks. It means that whenever you do something, people run Git commands against that repo. And yeah, Nuno, you guys have got lots of hooks, right? So if those hooks are using native Git and not JGit, and use JGit also to 251 that uses reftable, then you've got concurrency between maybe an operation in JGit that is doing auto-compaction of reftable and another hook that is executed concurrently. What happens? I will tell you, right? So I leave it to suspense. We'll see. And another thing, and this is big. So reftable is based on the concept of snapshots, right? It means that if you start and you create an instance of a repo that has a reftable, that reftable will not change. We implemented in JGit a kind of workaround to make reftable work with Gerrit that is doing the auto refresh. And I discussed with Hanwen that was writing the piece of code. He say, look, if you implement that, it's going to be a Frankenstein. So you shouldn't do that. But we needed to make it work with Gerrit, so we did. So it's configurable, so you can tell JGit reftable, only JGit reftable, that these reftable are auto-refreshed. But that is a kind of going against the concept of snapshot, because Gerrit actually doesn't really have so much of the concept of snapshots. Actually, Martin implemented the concept of snapshot on packet refs. But, of course, this is not anywhere in some other parts of Gerrit, and also some parts of JGit, they don't have the concept. So it means that if you open a repo for the very first time, you have a snapshot that is automatically updated. That is against the concept of reftable. And then the last one is the repacking, so the auto-reorganization of the files. So even if JGit and CGit, at the moment they delete it immediately, certain operating system, like for instance Windows, they will see that the file is still used and then will not be deleted. But then it means nobody will ever delete them. So it may leave some lingering files of the auto-compaction. That is something we need to fix, right? What is good about Ref directory? It seems strange. And say Ref directory actually was good. There were certain things that were good. So first, we don't really know how much will perform and how good it will perform reftable on NFS. We did extensive testing, right? And we compressed and we tested under heavy load on NFS. But the reality is, how many of you guys have implemented reftable on NFS? Only us in testing, nobody else, right? And Ref directory on NFS, raise your hand if you use the packet refs on NFS. Yes, you do, right? So there are people, and Martin knows how many gotchas that we got resolved with Ref directory. With reftable, we don't know yet, but I believe we will know and we will fix them, right? And then, yeah, one thing that I want to highlight is that packet refs was designed in that way, not because Linus Torvalds didn't know that SHA-1 was binary, should write it in binary format. But the idea of Linus was very simply, make it simple, right? So if you have a loose ref, it's a file. You do a cut of a file, is there. If it's broken, you recreate it, right? Packet refs, just all the loose refs, all put in the same file and sorted, right? You want to fix something, you can do it. With reftable, I believe we will need to build some tools for fixing it. We cannot fix it by hand, unless you really like, let's say, to encode data in your brain, which is possible, but unlikely, let's put it this way. Okay, so this is the performance, and this is what you wanted to know, how good it performs on the real-life repos, right? So that's the good thing. So this is with Gerrit 3.12.2, because before that version, did it work or did not work? No. Good, good. You were not sleeping. That's good. You had a good coffee this morning, right? Portuguese coffee? No, French one. Okay, so the good scenarios are, you see, overall they are either online or slightly faster, but the ones that are very fast are add patch set and push to create a change over HTTP. Why? Because they update multiple refs at the same time. So Gerrit and JGit had the concept of batch ref update many, many years ago. I believe it was introduced something like 10 years ago or something. So I'm really glad that CGit now gets it, because it's really important to have the batching of different updates altogether, not just for performance, but also transactionality. And here is where reftable really shines. But there are places where reftable is lower. So we have to be absolutely transparent about that, right? It's not the kind of philosopher's stone is going to turn everything into gold, right? So whenever you add a single ref or you modify a single ref in Gerrit, you add in a topic, you just modify one ref. You approve a change, scoring, right? One ref, create a tag, but many others, create drafts. All the things that you do in a unique way is going to be slower, significantly slower, because before it was not doing any auto-compaction. Why you see also slowness on the variance of that? Because if you update a single ref, before it was just a loose ref always. So the probability that that operation was lower was almost zero, right? Because you always do the same thing. With reftable, it's a kind of Russian roulette, right? Because it could be slightly slower if you just create a new table. Could be massively slower if you give a big repo to start doing some recompaction. So all of a sudden, something that before was super fast now could be slower. And I believe we've got some issues in Gerrit, because there's some operations that happen continuously, and they are single ref operations, such as the draft comments. I believe we should get rid of draft comments on the repo, right? Because that one, this is yet another problem of the draft comments. And it's even worse, because in Gerrit, all the draft comments for all the projects, they end up in which repo? Raise your hand. All users. So that's a design issue with Gerrit. It's nothing with reftable, but that will make things worse. So the probability that the people will start adding comments on Gerrit with reftable and then will start slowing down will be very high. So for all the people that have got a lot of users, raise your hand if your Gerrit has a lot of users. Yes, yes. So be careful. right? Because you may have, let's say, tens of thousands of people, they are just screaming and shouting and say, why I'm putting the draft comment, it is not there, I cannot see for 3 seconds. Okay, so we need to do something about that. But that is not about reftable. I believe it's about Gerrit, right? It was not a good idea to put in the repo.
Well, is that really true?
Oh, the microphone. Give it to us. There we go. Martin.
If I understand what you're saying, it was a design decision of Gerrit to use REST in this way, but I think what you're pointing out is that independent RESTs were faster
Before.
to update, but at the same breath, it doesn't matter. So the fact that these are independent RESTs, it's still faster to use a file table than draft tables.
Yes, it is. It will never be faster on reftable. Never, ever.
That I said on the benchmarking slide, where sequential updates of references are slow.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
ultimately that's because reftable is effectively a serialized process for all the rest of the entire repo.
And not all the refs all the time. So if you are lucky, with reftable, you add the ref, it just creates a new table, brand new table, right? If you're lucky. Serialize.
Graph can never be updated at a time. One batch of refs.
Yeah. And if you're unlucky, then you may be going into a auto reorg phase. And then in that case, instead of just creating one table, we'll also reorg the previous tables. And then if you're extremely unlucky, then you trigger a series of reorganization, and then it will take maybe a couple of seconds. And that is not an enormous amount of time because reftable is still fast, but it depends on the operation. If the people is publishing, creating a draft on UI, and you need to wait 3 seconds before you see any feedback, that is going to impact the user experience. It's fast 3 seconds, but every time you click it's 3 seconds. That is a bit sluggish, right? Okay. Let's go to the end because there is more, right? And maybe keep it there because I believe some question will come from there anyway. But we can have another dinner today, right? Okay, interoperability. So the good thing is that there is a lot of green, and this is because actually the Git project did a lot of work in including also the JGit test together with CGit for making sure they were interoperable. And I have to say that the corruption that I saw a few months ago is gone. So in all my tests, I've never seen ever a reftable created by CGit and read by JGit, or created by JGit and read by CGit that got recognized as corrupted. That didn't happen anymore. It was happening. And that's why I gave the warning a couple of months ago to Patrick. And that doesn't happen anymore. With Git version 2.51.1, that's the one that I tested last night, right? That's good. Auto compaction works and is interoperable between the two, so which is good again. There is one gotcha, though, if you do them concurrently. So the one that I mentioned before. So you have some automatic auto compaction happening on JGit. Guys, there is more space here. Come down, come down. Yeah, lots of space here. They're now reserved. Come down. Yeah. Here in front. Maybe if you can move on the side. Yeah, there we go. Because I see people waiting on the back of the room. Lots of space. Come over. And so the concurrency is good if you do JGit with JGit. So we tested that extensively. But unfortunately, last night, Patrick, I still see issues. So what I did is basically to have a production-like setup. At the moment, single primary, not on NFS, not multi-primary, single primary. And that was hammered with production load. And then I just did just series of Git GC. Git GC, one of the things they do is also the auto compaction of the ref table. And after 5 minutes, ref disappeared. It was not corrupted, but some refs disappeared. And it means that there was some concurrency in the auto compaction. So there was an auto compaction happening on CGit, and maybe another one automatically done in JGit. And in the contention between the two, some refs just disappeared. Not all of them, so it was not corrupted. But for instance, in my case, there was one change that lost its meta ref. So disappeared from the face of the earth for Gerrit. So it means that it is safe to use JGit with JGit, but if you want to use JGit with CGit in production, just make sure that your hooks, they don't use CGit at the moment. And then I'm sure that we'll follow up with Patrick, we'll fix those problems as well, okay? What's next? So as you can see, it's not really a highway, this one, because the point is exactly like this bridge. The problem is not what we know. The problem is what we don't know, right? So we do another step. Will it fall down? We will fall down into that cliff and we'll jump into the river. We don't know, right? But we have to do those steps for making sure, giving you guys assurance that it's working end to end, right? So first, of course, this maybe is going to be dinner conversation with Patrick. We should fix that one. Before making things fast, we need to make sure that a car has brakes. We don't have a car crash, right? So first is this. Needs to work concurrently. Nobody should be scared about running Git, native Git in a hook, and just be scared of losing refs. And of course, we need to fix this issue with the repository cache in JGit. So as I mentioned, so what we did for making it work in Gerrit was to basically do a little bit of hacking, right? And making sure that the snapshots in reftable are getting updated in real time, and that works. The problem is, as Han-Wen was telling me, you're doing a Frankenstein. So we need to make sure that turned into, actually is the right time of the year, right? Halloween is approaching. We need to make sure that these Frankenstein and vampires of Halloween, they go back to a kind of sanity and heavenly working situation, right? Here, I want ideas from you. So maybe more dinner discussion with you guys, right? And if you want to join for dinner, yeah, let me know. We can talk about reftable. We got the right people around the table. And then questions. So QR code is there. If you're shy, you can scan it and put questions online, or just go. Fire. Shoot.
You showed the performance metrics for HTTP. Do you see any problems with it using SSH?
Okay, yeah. So I don't foresee any problem if you use it over SSH. I'm telling you why I did over HTTP, because I could hammer a lot more. With SSH, I couldn't go to the level of parallelism that I did with HTTP. That's the only thing. And especially if I want to do a lot of them parallel load with multiple nodes, it's going to be a lot easier for me for HTTP. But there is absolutely no difference between HTTP or SSH. They will behave exactly in the same way. JGit doesn't really care about one or the other, right? Another question here.
So you mentioned that single wrap updating can be quite sluggish. What are your plans to fix this? Are you planning to, for example, stop using Git as a database, or like have a second repository that doesn't use reftable to store your metadata, or what's your plan?
My plan is, I don't know. So this is a dinner discussion, is more a question for everyone else. What shall we do? I don't really know. So one idea could actually be, why don't we use also looseref together with reftable? Why not? Reftable could actually replace packet refs, which was a bad idea. But actually, loose refs, they're not so bad after all. And actually, over NFS, they were an excellent idea because actually they are super cheap also to read and everything. So, but I don't know. The answer is I don't know. So I don't want to say that we're going to reintroduce the loose ref in reftable, because maybe Sean will come back and will just hammer me in the head during the night, right? Maybe can you pass the microphone to Patrick? There we go, 5 more minutes and it's going to be, yeah.
Part of the solution could also be to basically move the auto completion out of the critical path and do it asynchronously, for example, because that would at least get rid of the wild variances that you currently see.
Okay, yeah. So if you got more questions, Slido, you just scan the QR code now, put the questions, and we'll answer online on Slido as well, okay? Yeah, getting back to Martin. And now I introduce you to Jacek.